Hey, guess what? We're having a birthday party. I'm so excited. Sorry I can't stay in chat, but there's so much to do. Oh.
Everyone loves pizza, and mostly everyone loves video games. But what happens when you take those two and sandwich them over the ability to get one of those pinpoint impression toy needle art frames? Yeah, I had to look up the name. Well, aside from greasy buttons, childhood trauma, and disgusting little kids running around vomiting on abstract carpet, you get mostly a good time. That is, of course, if you're one of the aforementioned disgusting little kids. In fact, the slogan that rang through our TV sets would advertise a safe space that allowed kids to run free. No longer would a child be left to fend for themselves and exist as a hollow shell of an underdeveloped human being with a brain like an unwashed chicken cutlet, burdened with the problems of the real world like homework and the school bully. Kids all throughout the world would look up and see a hand extended behind the glass of their CRT televisions. A pungent gray in color, covered in matted fur and protected by one of those rider gloves that cholos would wear in a fight. A pair of oval-shaped eyes resting below a green snapback beckons you over, offering you a sanctuary, a safe space, a place where a kid can be a kid. Today we'll be discussing the inception, the history, the legacy, the rise and the fall of America's number one, number two, one of America's most recognizable rodents in recreation. Chuck E. Cheese, or his full name, Charles Entertainment Cheese, or his alias, the Big C. On account of his massive, the old Chuck and Suck has seen plenty of iterations and redesigns throughout his years, all done in hopes to modernize him and make him more relatable. But I don't know if I've ever related to a cartoon rat, a real rat, maybe. Besides, I can't exactly imagine kids today relating to his most modern design. I mean, just look at this thing. I can't quite describe how I feel about it, but honestly, if I saw that damn thing in my living room, I'd stomp on it until it was a small brown stain. I think in order to accurately tell the story of the Black Plague Bandit, we have to look at the company that he shills for. That story begins all the way back in 1974 with a little old company known as Atari. Atari, of course, is a famous video game company that's most known for, I don't know, probably a bunch of games your dad remembers. Ask him. Halo 2? I don't know. You see, back in the 70s, video games weren't as popular and mainstream as they are today. Most kids were more interested in developing classroom crushes or early undiagnosed STIs than video games.
Man, my microphone holding practice is really starting to pay off.
Hey, kudos. What's up, man? Toby just got Pong, if you didn't hear. We're gonna ride our bikes over there after school if you want in.
Pong? Look, I've already caught the clat, crabs, and the monster mash. I can't afford to catch this Pong thing as well.
But it's like a computer in your living room. It's what NASA used to fly the space penises into the moon's vagina.
Now you're speaking my language.
So this is where Atari comes in, and its founder, Nolan Bushnell. Bushnell had one goal in mind, and that goal was to expand upon the niche market that was video games. And not just video games, but video game arcades. See, back then, arcades were typically home to juvenile delinquents and just general miscreants who were having a night out on the town, smashing car windows, stealing purses, you know, getting pissed drunk, tossing some coins in a box, and beating the shit out of their friends in Pac-Man. I don't think that's how Pac-Man works. Most of them were sleazy places that were filled with cool things like drug use and alcohol, which makes you wonder why video games were associated with Poindexters and pocket protectors. Arcades weren't exactly a place that catered to kids, but to people who actually had money, like late teens and adults. So Bushnell wanted to create a place that a kid could come in and toss some coins in an illuminated box without breathing in the secondhand cigarette smoke from a 40-year-old ex-con. He had some previous experience with the amusement park industry, as well as a deep fondness for Disneyland's Country Bear Jamboree. If you don't know what that is, the Country Bear Jamboree was an attraction at Disney parks that would feature animatronic bears. The bears would come out and sing country songs to the families who attended the attraction. Sound familiar? Well, this is actually what inspired the inception of Fucky Feces. Nolan Bushnell saw the popularity of these lovable characters and thought that he should probably whip up a friendly face that the kids would love to see as they walk in through the door of his establishment. Friendly is in quotations, by the way. So with the idea buzzing around in his brain like a tumor, he attended the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, or the IAAPA. It was kind of like a furry convention, but everybody there was cosplaying as your techie uncle. And that's when he found it. The holy grail of fursuits. I hate this. At the time, he thought he had just stumbled across a really cool coyote costume, so he placed his order with the suit maker and went home that night to begin putting the wheels into motion as he waited for the suit to arrive. Coyote Pizza would be the first name that he went with. However, once his newly tailored fursona arrived in the mail, he made a startling discovery. Care to guess what it was? Well, if you guessed big penis and balls, you're wrong. It was a tail, a long pink tail in fact. So with the new realization that he got completely ripped off and received a rat instead of a coyote, he was in too deep to take it back. So he decided on a new name for his arcade/pizza restaurant, Rick Rat's Pizza Time Theater. This was done as sort of like a tongue-in-cheek parody of Mickey Mouse. That name wouldn't last long, however, because Atari's PR agency were so disgusted to find out that Bushnell was appointing a rat to be the face of the kid-friendly establishment. After all, his whole reason for doing this was to get kids to come in and beat the shit out of each other in some virtual table tennis. So he changed it to Chuck E. Cheese, in an effort to downplay the whole rat thing, still keep the satirical naming convention as Mickey Mouse, and his thought process behind the name Chuck E. Cheese was that you can't say it without smiling. Go ahead, give it a shot. You could probably do it, right? Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah, see, it's not that hard. It's stupid, but it was the 70s. Okay, so he has a name, he has a mascot, and he's ready to open up shop.
By now, it's probably no surprise to anybody that we got a birthday number coming up here.
Well, it's a surprise to me. I didn't even get a present.
Me neither, Big C.
That's because it's not your birthday, nitwit.
Oh, yeah!
On May 17th, 1977, the first Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater opened in San Jose, California. And even though they tried to make him not so rat-like, that's exactly what he was. I mean, homie was walking around with a pointy snout, a long pink tail, and horrifying protruding teeth. So to fix this, they appointed legendary Child's Pizza restaurant mascot consultant Harold Goldbranson to make the pizza pest a bit more sexy. Goldbranson would fit Chuck with a fancy vest, a bow tie, and an adorable little derby hat. He also had a cane and a cigar, like some sort of cabaret stripper. However, the cigar would be removed when Chuck quit smoking during the 1980s Great American Smokeout campaign. Is it just me, or is it kind of weird to think of Chuck E. Cheese as an ex-smoker? As the franchise grew through the 80s, it proved to be a lot harder to equip every location with the same outfit for Chuck, since the materials used were hard to find. So they cheaped out and swapped the gold-plated uranium vest with a silkscreen printed vest to make it more universal across locations. A small change, but a notable one nonetheless. The animatronic shows that would be put on for the kids at Pizza Time Theater featured a lovable band known as the Pizza Time Players. These horrifying abominations included Jasper T. Jowls, Pasquale, Krusty the Cat, who would later be euthanized and replaced by Mr. Munch, the Warblets, Helen Henny, and the Rat himself. The set would include sarcastic banter as well as the musical stylings of the band. Robot Ratatouille was originally voiced by a man named John Widelock, who took inspiration from Muggs McGinnis. The early Chuck was abrasive and sort of an asshole, really selling that Jersey rat attitude. John would be the voice of Chuck from 1977 until 1984 when he was replaced by Scott Wilson. The weird thing about this is the decision was made during a recording session for an animated Christmas special called The Christmas That Almost Wasn't, which will later become The Christmas That Definitely Wasn't and Could Never Be, on account of it never progressing beyond some basic animated stills and some pretty basic voiceover work. During recording for the animation, Widelock was asked to sing a song as Chuck, but wasn't very good at singing, so they let Scott try out since he was already on set as the voice of Mr. Munch. Scott nailed the musical number and was dubbed the new Chuck E. Cheese right there on the spot. Goddamn, it must suck to have your job just stolen away because he couldn't hit a goddamn Mariah Carey squeal. With this change in throat pipes came a change in personality. Chuck became more friendly and lovable as opposed to his brash and rough around the edges past self. He was a new rat. He attended AA meetings, got his sobriety chips, was granted visitation rights to go see his disgusting little rat family. And this is where things would really take a turn for Chuck in the franchise.
You've never seen a place like Showbiz Pizza Place. We'll serve you a pizza second to none. So come for pizza, stay for the fun.
In 1986, Pizza Time Theater would go bankrupt and would be acquired by Showbiz Pizza. Showbiz Pizza was very similar to Chuck E. Cheese and more so to the aforementioned Country Bear Jamboree. They offered arcade games, pizza, and even an animatronic band known as the Rockafire Explosion. Aptly named, as those were the three things the animatronics were good at. And no exaggeration, these are the scariest motherfuckers I've ever seen in my life. I have a deathly fear of animatronics, so just looking at images of these dudes, you make me lactate bear mace. Anyway, while the merger would keep the two companies as separate entities, the animatronics would have some crossover, creating their own satanic cinematic universe. This would continue into the 90s, however during this time, the Chuck E. Cheese cast would prove to be way more popular than the show-pissed Pizza Boys, and the company found it in their best interest to just make Chuck the rightful face of the company again. And they did this by rebranding all of their locations as Chuck E. Cheese's. So Chuck and his friends built an empire, lost it all through bankruptcy and countless child bodies buried in the ball pit, caught a buyout from his animatronic brethren, and forced them into irrelevancy. Goddamn, I wouldn't be surprised if Chuck fucked Billy Bob's wife. I mean, just look at him. Now that's a big brain move. To celebrate the occasion, Chuck would see another redesign. This time they would give him a tuxedo and a red bow tie. I do have to wonder though if this was merely a coincidence or if they were still hell-bent on parodying Disney's future glue trap victim Mickey Mouse. Because if you compare the two, the fits are pretty damn similar. I mean, they're almost identical. Chuck would sport the thrift store tux for a few years until corporate did what corporate does and decided, hey, you know what? This grown man dressed as a rat, he kind of sucks, we gotta make him cool. Now this was the time before business executives could utilize shortcuts like Instagram and flossing to make their mascots more hip and cool. So instead they opted to ditch the derby hat, give him a baseball cap, and occasionally swap out his wardrobe with more hip outfits. Thus ring in the era that is deemed as Cool Chuck, or the Chuck that fucks. So if you were born around the same time as I was, then this is probably where you start to recognize the early gapings of the buck-toothed butthole, but we're not quite there yet. Fast forward to 1997, we're quickly approaching the new millennium. Chuck needed another overhaul outside of a simple wardrobe change. So they ditched the moldy fursuits that have been sitting in the changing room for the last 2 decades and instead went with a more modern animated Chuckster. This iteration was dubbed Avenger Chuck, or Thumb Chuck, since he greeted guests with a nice up yours as they walked into the establishment. I don't exactly know why these different iterations have nicknames, but during my research for this video, I realized that the characters in the story of Chuck E. Cheese have a pretty diehard fan base. I don't understand it. With this fresh new look came a new voice. After voicing the rat for over a decade, Scott Wilson was assassinated and replaced by Duncan Brannon. Cool Chuck was still used in the restaurants as the rat you would see walking around taking pictures with the kids and scaring the shit out of toddlers who had no idea where the hell they were.
What's wrong with you, man?
See, now this is exactly what I think of when I think of Chuck E. Cheese. I mean, as a kid, I spent pretty much every single one of my birthday parties at the Chuck E. Cheese playroom. But one time, I actually snuck behind the curtains just to see what happens after the curtains come down. And let me tell you, that was probably one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I think being greeted by the dead eyes of robot animals is probably what scarred me for life. This iteration of Chuck would prove to be so popular throughout the 90s that they changed all the branding in 2001 to reflect Avenger Chuck. God, I hate saying that. He would remain as the face of the company throughout the 2000s, and as the years passed, Chuck was a constant reminder of the place that was so successful throughout the 90s. Things would actually stay the same up until 2012. Alright, so this is where Chuck's legacy really takes a turn, and I think you know why with how I started this video. The start of the 2010s, Chuck E. Cheese sales were plummeting because kids were showing less interest in the franchise. It could be because video games were kind of like tap water. It's just kind of in your house somehow. The idea of taking your kids to a place to eat pizza and play video games was more of a once-a-year thing as opposed to an every weekend thing like it used to be. People didn't give a fuck about the Chuck. So to combat this, Chuck received another overhaul. This time more dramatic than he's ever seen, because up until the move to animated Chuck, the changes were fairly minimal. The company hired character artist Chris Avers to design a new rat from the ground up. This Chuck would be named Rock Chuck. The walk-around suit was given a giant bulbous and almost cartoon-like head. Not only that, but they made him more slim and youthful than past iterations. I fucking hate him. The change would upset patrons and employees of the franchise alike. Some locations even refused to make the change to the more modern mouse. The change wouldn't just be implemented to the Chuck suit either, but the animated one used in commercials. Throughout his life, he always had a humanoid-like scale. Even with his change in the 90s, he still stood as tall as the kids at least. But with the new look came new proportions, and I'm not talking about a big old pair of fake tits, no. They made him the size of an actual goddamn rat. At least with the full-size rat, you know, it's like I can look you in the eyes. I understand you, you understand me. With this one, no, I'm not sharing a slice of za with that thing. My instinct is telling me to kill this, to exterminate it. It's a pest. Stomp on it until it was a small brown stain. Oh, and I forgot to mention, this Chuck also got a new voice as well. You remember the band Bowling for Soup? Probably not. The lead singer Jarrett Reddick would actually replace Duncan as the rat since the new iteration needed one that could sing. Man, talk about full circle. This of course did come with some controversy considering many kids grew up with Duncan as the rat we all know and love, since the franchise really saw a spike in popularity throughout the 90s.
After all, I mean, what's there not to love about this guy right here?
It's unfortunate, but seeing their direction now, it makes sense. I mean, the franchise was built upon performing and musical numbers. Hell, Chuck even has a YouTube channel where they put out sing and dance alongs. And that kind of ties into the modern day, the year of despair, 2020. Chuck has definitely seen better days. The uploads to the YouTube channel sort of offer a Chuck E. Cheese experience from home, but without the pizza and video games. So is that really the full experience? As of right now, the company is on the precipice of Chapter 11 bankruptcy once again, for obvious reasons. Video games and pizza are a dime a dozen these days, and with the current state of the world, it's no surprise that kids aren't exactly filling up the ball pit like they used to, even though their commercials would make you believe otherwise. And while it is sad to see the downward spiral of the brand that was once synonymous with joy and laughter, it's now more synonymous with vertically filmed videos of drunk parents fighting over who was first in line for the ticket muncher. And even though most people don't like the redesign, I'm sure most people have some of those old photos with Chuck in a shoebox somewhere. I guess the main takeaway from all this is even though the company has seen so many different changes, the rat has seen so many different iterations, and there's a chance that the company might just completely disappear, I think it's important to remember that the company was built on the foundation of making memories in that establishment. I mean, you go in there, you take pictures, the whole point of it was to document your experience at Chuck E. Cheese. Honestly, the old rat has given us decades of laughter, happiness, joy, and jubilation, but most importantly, he provided us with a place where a kid can be a kid, and that's gotta count for something, right? I mean, shit, kids could have been shooting up heroin behind a Circle K. Thanks for watching, everybody.
I want it to be your place. I want it to be a place where kids can have the best day of their lives. Safe, clean, but at the end of the day, fun. And I think we're doing just that. So what's missing? Well, right now, the only thing missing is you.
Big thank you to Frost Drive, like Nancy with a J, that one, The Rhino, Digital Dice Hater, Trivia Chick, Zachary Pouillet, Boblax, Internet Unwind, Satan, Polite, Mr. Caleb G98, Super Cyanide, Tarvey Herv, Alpha RW, Diafix, Gimmicky, Swaginus Maximus, Dojangles, Bixler, Looney Mania 123, Burger Creek, Banked, Pantsless Gamers, Super Swim Team 7, Tabor TCU, Chris Has Fun, Matthias Cronston Nygren, Unusual Enigma, Rebecca Anderson, Spider-Man John, Daniel Terrazas, Josh Anthony, Flynn, Davy Joe 262, Determined Saito, Jordan Stein, Lawrence, Many Kudos, One Punch This Dick, Lars, Caleb M. Callahan, Yason.